way. Unfair. Magnus told him. Will he keep it?
Well, considering Magnus told him, it would be unfortunate to then take it back and go,
Whoop.
well, it's been taken back, and handshake, and we are off. E4 indeed played by Magnus Carlsen. What are we expecting from Shevchenko? C5. Sicilian, and knight c6 played.
Let's expect Rosalima with bishop b5.
No, knight f6.
Have it.
Nice provocative move there. You know, asking White, are you going to come forward? Are you going to change that knight? Bishop takes knight and then come forward with the e-pawn, or are you just simply going to close the position down and play d3? And
d3 was the choice.
Yeah, Black is going to be arguing that by placing the knight very early on f6, he can maybe reroute it to knight to d7 and prepare e5, but queen c7 played.
In preparation for the move, e7, e5. Knight d2.
Knight d2.
e5 to come very quickly. I'm a little bit surprised. Even by the hesitation, one of the things you don't want to do is allow White to get a grip with e5 followed by knight c4. So e5, better late than never.
And knight c4, putting pressure on e5.
Now here, for Black to do is simply to protect the pawn, to play the move knight to d7. There is a school.
Well, you spoke too soon. Yes, b5 indeed played. But
okay, that one caught me by surprise because of the attack to e5. I thought it was natural to defend the pawn. He didn't. Kirill, what a challenge. b5.
And
instantly knight to d2. Apparently this is known to be an error. Knight takes e5, bishop to d6. I was wondering what White was going to do to play d4. White has lost some time, but he's induced the move b5.
Exactly, and b5
is not a pawn weakness that you
very risky move, right?
Exactly.
Because you can see that White is next going to go a4, put the bishop on a3, and then start eyeballing the c5 pawn. But bishop to e6 played.
a4 and bishop to a3.
And Black is perhaps will eventually force the way through with the c-pawn by preparing c5, c4.
Normally, you would probably start with a move like queen e2 here, from what you're saying, to prevent c5, c4. And at the same time, I still like what you've also recommended, Jovi, which was get in the move a4. And now that the pawn, the peshki, is on b5, it's a potential weakness, but you've got to weaken it. You've got to start with a move like a4. Castles.
I like the move a4 as well, because it also, White then has the key to opening up the A line, and that's something that Black will have to calculate at every opportunity. But instead, Magnus plays knight to g5, harassing the light square bishop. Bishop moves to g5, attacking the queen, and now the queen simply sidesteps. But the issue remains, like, how are you going to actually give a role to this bishop on g4? And the attacks and counterattacks continue. Knight to d7.
A little confused by the cat and mouse play that's going on here. Knight g5 inducing bishop g4, and knight you could have played h6 and just forced the knight back, but h3, and you don't want to go back to e6 and allow the capture. I don't think you want to take and allow bishop takes g5, although I suspect that's how you're going to get an imbalance. I think h takes g4 is what Magnus wants the most. Knight takes f7, knight takes h7. This move knight d7 is
no, he's gone bishop h5.
And immediately back.
Exactly. Well, the knight did have to move.
Immediately.
But the question is, this bishop on h5, it could get locked out of the game if Black isn't careful. A well-timed g4, as you're highlighting, puts the clamp on f5, and now bishop b2. The knight is now rerouting to f5.
I must say that in my view, Kirill has actually done extremely well, and White really hasn't achieved the types of advantage he needs in this position. White basically needs to play f4. He needs a break. And as soon as this knight gets to e6, it really shuts that down. So at last, Magnus is looking across the board and saying, well, where do I find play? And he's come back to his a4 move. I personally would just play a6 and try to say, okay, open up the a file, let's go.
That's true. But there is a point. c5 is still incredibly vulnerable. And the trades have favored black. So I'm thinking the queen can now slide up to e3, the Goldilocks square. The reason why you want to put the queen on the 3rd or the 6th row for black is because the queen can actually go between the two sides a lot more easily. And say rook a2, okay. Yeah, I can see what's happening now. We can just see that Magnus is planning queen to e3, moving the rook to a1, provoking some kind of b4.
No, I wouldn't play b4 myself.
No,
but,
exactly.
Here, I'm also starting to think that I don't like what Magnus has done.
Really?
No, at all. I really don't. I kind of think that, well, I like black's position, actually. So I start to think, okay, where's my golden opportunity to play? And I'm thinking the knight on f4 is really well placed. The bishop on h5 has done its job. It's ready to redirect itself towards the h3 pawn. And what black really needs, strangely enough, is a way to open up the king side. How are you going to open up this king side? Well, g5, h5. Let's have some fun. Let's put the bishop on e6. If you like, you're welcome to play the move queen a1.
No, what I wanted to do was queen to e3.
Queen to e3.
Queen to e3, again eyeballing c5, and then what I was kind of
e6.
hoping is to go a takes b5, and then move the other rook to a1, and say I got control of the queen side. You can have your play on the king side.
I'll take it, because I really think that when you're playing with bishops of opposite colors, the player with the initiative has a huge advantage, because he's playing with a bishop that you cannot challenge. So, yes, you've got your queen e3. Now imagine just, Jovi, just to really put a clamp on your thoughts about white's position.
This was something that I was thinking about
C4?
just now, c4, because two can play the game of chess, right?
Well, again, this idea that you've got bishops of opposite color, in this particular case, what Kirill is thinking is takes. If you take with the pawn back, I have a move rook takes d2, followed by bishop takes c4.
That's very beautiful.
And the rook on a2 and the rook on f1
Do we
are
have
hanging.
time to show it?
I'm a little reluctant myself.
Okay.
But okay, the idea is we take the pawn and we sacrifice in exchange. In case. And what has he done? Yes.
He's taken the pawn on c4. Well, I suddenly, just like that,
and
I prefer black's position.
Exactly.
Bishop to a3.
And bishop to a3 asks the question, where do you want to move your queen? Is it desirable to induce bishop to c5? I would think not. I would think that it would be better just to move the queen, for argument's sake, to, let's say, d7.
d7 and control the d line.
Yes.
Because the bishop wants to be on c5 anyhow. So
yes, so why
get it
encourage
there?
it? Yes. One of the things in these middle game positions is you really want to induce your opponent to put their pieces on vulnerable squares. And there we have it. Takes, queen e6. He wanted it. For me, the big question was between queen d2. Would you like to trade queens? I want to mate you on g2.
Yeah, you're making good progress, right?
Right.
Getting a rook onto the second row and rook
here,
to b2, queen takes c4.
Queen takes c4 is on black's agenda, as is very simple chess. Rook to d7, rook to d8, rook to d2. Really, reaching into the king side and that g2 square. If I can play rook to d2, it's a monster move. Queen takes c4, rook d7. What would you prefer? Rook d7.
Rook d7.
Asked and answered.
Going for complete control. I mean, is there any way that white can do some repair work, go Rook F2, King H2, kick that silly horse that's there in the middle of the board.
Don't reach for the G-pawn.
Yeah.
Don't reach for the G-pawn when your king is on H2.
Yeah. I was kind of
I
thinking
know what
the queen was perhaps moving to C4, but you're right.
But
Rook to B6.
Okay.
Magnus actively striving to create his own counterplay, but really, there's nothing there.
Exactly. Rook to D8, menacing
D2.
Rook to D2. And again, there's going to be checkmates.
I mean, I can see a scenario where the rook will come down to D1, and then there will be a sacrifice on H3. Queen comes to H3.
Crashing through. And queen takes C4 is perfectly reasonable here.
H5.
Wow. Kirill is basically, he's going for the gusto now. King H2. Okay, you were talking about rook coming down to D1. By the way, what's the clock times?
Well, the clock times is Kirill now, 30 seconds on the clock. And Magnus Carlsen are ticking down to 44 seconds. Do remember that the players are getting a 2-second time bonus per move. And Magnus coming in with the queen. But this is the moment where you have to have good nerves.
No, I'm sorry to say, I think there's a blunder alert. I'm sure Kirill's intention was to play rook to D2 ideas. But this move, queen C5, he could have played queen takes C4. He's blundered the position. King H7 was atrocious move. Now Magnus has taken over. Yeah. It's just a very, very, very bad
and now
timing.
With queen takes A5, he covers the D2
and
square.
He touched his rook.
He's got to move it. Okay, trade of rooks.
He touched his rook and he was about to leave his rook on D8 hanging.
Kirill down to 7 seconds.
No.
C5.
Too many pawns. Too many
this
pawns.
bishop on E3 just controls. Now Magnus gets the control of the D line.
Yeah, it's all.
And now the A pawn starts motoring. Queen to A2. Okay, it's not over until it's over. Queen takes C2 is the big threat.
I think it's time for C6 and rook D7.
Yep, that's convincing. I wonder whether he's perhaps going to go for rook D2 just to keep everything controlled. But no, rook D7 played.
Rook to D7, intriguing.
He's just going to be walking the
Queen F5.
Queen F5,
Threatening
devastating
queen takes
threat.
H5.
The queen takes pawn.
Magnus got lucky.